bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 4, Text 15. Chapter entitled Sati Quits her body. Yat-pāda-padmaṁ mahatāṁ mano libhir niṣevitam brahma-rasāsavārthibhiḥ lokasya varṣati cāśiṣo rthinas tasmai druhyati viśva-bandhave. You are envious of Lord Shiva, who is the friend of all living entities within the three worlds. For the common man, he fulfills all desires, and because of their engagement in thinking of his lotus feet, he also blesses higher personalities who are seeking after brahmānanda, transcendental bliss. Responsibly, purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Ordinarily, there are two classes of men. One class are grossly materialistic, want material prosperity, and their desires are fulfilled if they worship Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva, being very quickly satisfies the material desires of the common man very quickly. Therefore, it is seen that ordinary men are very much apt to worship him. Next, those who are disgusted or frustrated with the materialistic way of life worship Lord Shiva to attain salvation, which entails freedom from material identification. One who understands that he is not the material body, but his spirit soul is liberated from ignorance. Lord Shiva also offers that facility. People generally practice religion for economic development, to get some money, for by getting money they can satisfy their senses. But when they are frustrated, they want spiritual brahmānanda or merging into the Supreme. These four principles of material life, religion, economic development, sense gratification and liberation, exist, and Lord Shiva is a friend of both the ordinary man and the man who is elevated in spiritual knowledge. Thus it was not good for Daksha to create enmity towards him. Even Vaishnavas who are above both the ordinary and the elevated men in this world also worship Lord Shiva as the greatest Vaishnava. Thus he is the friend of everyone, the common man, the elevated men, and the devotees of the Lord. And no one should disrespect or create enmity towards Lord Shiva. Om Jnana Tivanandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakya Chakshur Milatanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri yat-pāda-padmaṁ Shri Gurun Vaishnavanashta Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raguna Tanvitam Tham Sajevam Sadvetam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanitamscha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivadasi Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare yat-pāda-padmaṁ mahatāṁ mano libhir niṣevitam brahma-rasāsavārthibhiḥ lokasya varṣati cāśiṣo rthinas tasmai druhyati viśva-bandhave. So, at this point in the Bhagavatam, Sati is speaking to her father Daksha. Sati is very annoyed that her father Daksha is being disrespectful to her elevated personality of the magnitude of Lord Shiva. Vaishnavam yatha sambhu. Shiva is not an ordinary personality. Vaishnavam yatha sambhu. He is the greatest of all the Vaishnavas. Just like from milk you can make yogurt, but then that yogurt cannot be converted back to milk. So similarly, Lord Shiva is an expansion of the Supreme Lord, but he is not as powerful as the Supreme Lord. So Lord Shiva's position is a very exalted, privileged position. And there is no reason why Daksha should be disrespectful to him. Sati is stoned because on the one hand, Daksha is her father and Shiva is her husband. But the Sati insisted on going to Daksha's house, hoping that she may be able to enlighten Daksha to understand the foolishness of his offensive attitude towards Lord Shiva. So, in speaking to Daksha, Sati is pointing out, "You're envious of Lord Shiva." So, it is not uncommon for materialistic individuals to be envious of devotees of the Lord, isn't it? It is not uncommon. It is historical. It is not that only today, all of a sudden, the 20th century materialists have become envious of the devotees of the Lord, and the materialists of the previous centuries or previous ages were not envious. Apparently, reading about this incident between Shiva and Daksha, it would appear to us that it is almost historical that the non-devotees or those who are devotees with motives are envious of those who want to be pure devotees. So we see that Daksha is actually envious of Lord Shiva, and this is being supported by Sati also. Sati is saying that you are envious, and he is the friend of all living entities. So Lord Shiva is being described by Sati to be a friend of all living entities. There are 12 spiritual authorities. Dharma visakshat bhagavad pranita. First of all, we must understand that religion means the laws of God. Religion is not something that can be fabricated by any ordinary individual. So this doctrine of developing love for the Supreme Lord, this is advocated by the Mahajans, and there are 12 Mahajans that are recognized in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Swayambhu Narada Sambhu. There is Brahma, Narada, Sambhu. Who is Sambhu? Shiva. Sambhu is none else but Shiva. Swayambhu Narada Sambhu. Kamara Kapilo Manu. Called the four Kumaras. Kapila. Swayambhu Manu. Manu refers to Swayambhu Manu. Palado Janako Bhismo. Prahlad, King Janak, and Bhismadev. Bali Yasakir Vayam. And there is Bali Maharaj, Śrīla Gopāla and myself. These are the 12 authorities of religion. So Shiva certainly could not be placed to be one of the Mahajans or authorities on religion if he was an ordinary individual. But so, Daksha was indeed committing a great offense in being envious of a person of the magnitude of Lord Shiva. Shiva means all auspicious. So Shiva is all auspicious for everyone. Lord Shiva is a friend of all living entities. Over here, Sati is saying, who is a friend of all living entities within the three worlds. For example, on one occasion, when there was an ocean full of poison, Lord Shiva held the water of the ocean, the poisonous waters, in his throat. So he did that so that nobody else would drink that poison. So Lord Shiva works for the welfare of all living entities. He blesses the conditioned souls so that they may progressively advance on this spiritual path. So Lord Shiva is a friend of all living entities. This is the characteristic of a saintly personality. Devahuti was informed by Kapila Dev that she could free herself from the miseries of material existence. Devahuti pleaded to her son Kapila that I am an old lady who does not know how to terminate this material existence that offers nothing but misery. You please enlighten me how I can terminate this material existence. So Kapila Dev, being an incarnation of Godhead, who had appeared as her son, responded by saying that, Mother, take to the path of devotional service. And this devotional service can be executed in the association of saintly personalities. So Devahuti then inquired from Kapila, how do you recognize a saintly personality? Isn't it? It's a very logical question. How do you recognize a saintly personality? And in response to this question, Kapila Dev gave the following answer. Titikshava karunika surda sarvadhainam ujata shatravashanta sadva sadhu bhushana. So Kapila Dev describes the characteristics as follows. Titikshava, very tolerant. Karunika, merciful. Surda sarvadainam means friend of all living entities. Ajata shatrava santa. He is not inimical towards anyone. He is peaceful. He lives by the scriptures. So Lord Shiva also is a friend of all living entities. This is one of the characteristics of a saintly personality. So Lord Shiva is a friend of all living entities, as it is being supported in this verse by Sati. For the common man, he fulfills all desires. So Shiva is so merciful that he fulfills the desire of everyone. Once there was a devotee of Shiva who approached Lord Shiva and said, please give me some benediction, please give me this benediction that I may be able to separate the head from the trunk of everyone's body, wherever I touch. So Shiva said, okay, take it. So ultimately this man came to Shiva. He was trying to touch Shiva's head. He wanted to separate Shiva's head. And then ultimately Shiva had to withdraw that curse. But Shiva is so kind that he gives these blessings so easily. Actually, Daksha's anger at Shiva was just due to false ego. Because Lord Shiva, even though he was the son-in-law of Daksha, he was totally absorbed in meditation on the Supreme when Daksha walked into the sacrificial arena. So there was absolutely no need for Daksha to be offended. But because Daksha was operating on the bodily platform, and because he was proud of the role that he was given to expand the population, we see that Daksha is grossly misusing his position. So they are different material qualities that actually become an obstacle on the journey back to Godhead. Lord Shiva actually has been saved by the Supreme Lord in not having been invited again to the sacrifice that was being held by Daksha. So there are 6 qualities that actually become an obstacle on the path back to Godhead. The 6 qualities of the Bhagavatam list are education. Education actually becomes, if one is very maturely educated, then actually that becomes an obstacle. Austerity, if it is for the purpose of the Lord, or pleasing the Lord, it is welcome. But if austerity is for the purpose of realizing material benefits, then certainly it is not the proper use of austerity. Hiranyakashipu, as we said the other day, performed extreme austerities, but the purpose of his austerities was to become deathless. So a devotee performs austerities for the pleasure of the Lord. Wealth. Those who are wealthy tend to ignore the path of devotional service. They tend to ignore the path of devotional service because they are able to obtain whatever the needs may be from the resources that they have, beauty. When one is very beautiful, he again tends to become very proud, and because of that pride, he identifies with the body and neglects the process of devotional service. Then there is a youth and heritage. So if one is born in a very aristocratic family, again one tends to ignore the Supreme Lord. When one is youthful, instead of using the youth to serve the Lord, because youth is the time when one has the maximum energy, one will waste his youth. One who is on the materialistic platform will waste the youth and just pursue the path of sense enjoyment. So these are different material qualities that make one proud and help one identify with the body, and hence one doesn't surrender to the Supreme Lord. So Sati is very offended. Sati knows Shiva's greatness, and she is very offended at the attitude that is being adopted by Daksha. In the purport, Prabhupada talks about two classes of men. One is those who are grossly materialistic, who want material prosperity, and they approach Lord Shiva. And then there are those who are frustrated with the material path and who want complete freedom from materialistic activities, or those who want to take to the process of pure devotional service. So Krishna is offering the path of pure devotional service. Shiva is all auspicious, one of the spiritual authorities, one who is very easily pleased, one who is concerned about the welfare of others. And we have the example of how Lord Shiva held the ocean of poison in his neck. And Shiva is very, very merciful. Now, Sati is very upset with Daksha, because actually Daksha has indeed committed a great offense. And by committing this great offense, Daksha actually is just ruining his own spiritual future. So Lord Shiva is accepted as one of the greatest Vaishnavas. And the Vaishnavas are those who are para dukha dukhi. The Vaishnavas are those who also are affected when they see that others are on the path of materialistic life. The Vaishnava is not happy seeing somebody else take to the path of sense enjoyment. Just like, for example, we have Prahlād Maharaj. Prahlād Maharaj says, "So chetato vimokasa chetasendriyartha maya sakhaya bhanam udvato vimoram." Prahlād Maharaj says that, my dear Lord, when I look at the materialists who are trying to convert a position of distress to a position of comfort, that is essentially what the materialist is always trying to do. There is distress in human life. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, "Dukhalayam shāśvatam." No one can deny that these two characteristics exist, regardless of whether one takes his birth in an aristocratic family or a pauper's family. So the materialists are constantly making plans to escape the miseries of life. So Prahlād Maharaj says, "Sachetato vimukasa chetasendriyartha." When I look at the plight of the materialist who are trying to convert a position of distress to a position of comfort, my heart actually laments. Therefore Prahlād Maharaj was very fortunate to have received the knowledge of devotional service when he was in the womb of his mother. Prahlād's mother was once being dragged by the demigods. The demigods were very concerned that this lady may not be carrying another Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu had created enough trouble for the demigods and all the inhabitants, and the demigods did not want another Hiranyakashipu. So while Indra and others were dragging Prahlād's mother, Narada appeared on the scene. And when he was informed that the demigods were concerned that another Hiranyakashipu may not be born from Hiranyakashipu's wife. Narada assured the demigods that the child within the womb of this lady is a very exalted sage. And on the assurance given by Narada, the demigods released Prahlad's mother, and she was given shelter by Narada Muni. So Narada Muni spoke the philosophy of Bhagavad Dharma. He spoke the philosophy of Bhagavad Dharma to Prahlad's mother. So Prahlad had heard this philosophy of devotional service when he was in his mother's womb. So as soon as he came out of the mother's womb, he was fully prepared with the knowledge of devotional service. So Prahlad Maharaj, and playing the role of an idol Vaishnava, earlier when we mentioned the 12 names of spiritual authorities, Prahlad's name, as you may recall, was also mentioned. So Prahlad is considered to be one of the spiritual authorities of religion. So Prahlad Maharaj has stated that the materialists are always trying to convert a position of distress to a position of comfort. So Prahlad said, I am not interested in withdrawing myself to the mountains or the forest or any other secluded place, but I want to be where the people are so that I can inspire them to the path of devotional service. So Prahlad's instructions are very important and of great value in progressing on the spiritual path. Prahlad Maharaj, for example, discusses the concept of happiness. Everybody is searching for happiness. The animals are searching for happiness. The materialists are searching for happiness, and so is the spiritualist searching for happiness. It is not that the spiritualist is not searching for happiness. It is not that the spiritualist, in exchange for his tapasya, experiences spiritual happiness. We worship Krishna, Bhaktaram Yagataposam. The Krishna, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, is worshipped. And the devotee, by serving the Supreme, who is the Supreme Enjoyer, also experiences happiness. So Prahlad Maharaj says, Narativadam Swarta Gatim He Vishnu, Durasaya Bahir Arthamanina, Andhaya Thanter Upanya Manas. So Prahlad Maharaj is saying, Narativadam Swarta Gatim He Vishnu, that people are so foolish that they do not know that real happiness can only be found by worshipping Vishnu. And instead we see that they are making so many other plans for getting happiness. But actually happiness can be found through the process of worshipping Vishnu. And worshipping Vishnu to develop love of God. In the purport, Prabhupada talks about dharma, artha, kama, moksha, the four principles of material life. These are called the four principles of material life because when one takes the dharma for the purpose of realizing economic wealth, and this economic wealth is desired so that one can have sense enjoyment, because one has to pay for sense enjoyment. You do not get sense enjoyment free. And obviously, since one has to pay for sense enjoyment, one has to endeavor to gain that money. So, generally, people take to dharma to realize artha, kama and moksha. And if they can get artha, kama and moksha without dharma, then they don't even turn to dharma. Just like these days, the prosperous countries are so set up that regardless of whether you want to work or not, you don't starve, isn't it? Even if you don't want to work, even if you want to be a lazy man, no problem. The welfare system is there to take care of you. So people don't have to turn to God anymore, isn't it? And if you don't have a job, you get unemployment insurance. You have that in Australia too, unemployment insurance. So if you run out of an unemployment insurance, you have the welfare insurance. So there's always something to bail you out. So there is really no need to turn to God. And as a result, as Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam, the temples and the churches and all have become empty places. So generally the materialist, even if he takes to dharma, he takes to realize these different goals. But the devotee of Krishna, he is considered to be niskama. The two types or two categories of devotees, sakama and niskama. Sakama devotees covers those who take to religion but with material motives. Of course, one can argue that in the Bhagavad Gita, it is Krishna only who himself says that four types of pious people surrender to me. So one may say, what is the harm? Chatur vida bhajante mam. Four types of pious people can surrender to the Lord. One who is in distress, one who wants economic wealth, one who is inquisitive, and one who is one who wants economic wealth, one who is in distress, one who is inquisitive, and one who is curious. One who is a genuine seeker of knowledge, So these four types of people do surrender to the Lord. But one who takes to niskama bhakti, he does not enter into any transaction with the Lord. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy is the philosophy of pure bhakti. And the Srimad Bhagavatam also concentrates on this philosophy. Therefore, at the very inception, the Bhagavatam says, Dharma prochitaha kaitota parmo nirmatsaram sata. That this Srimad Bhagavatam completely rejects, not partially, completely rejects the utilization of religion for anything else other than developing the love of God. It is only when one is on this pure path of bhakti can the living entity be satisfied. The Bhagavatam confirms this point by saying, Sarve punsam paro dharmo yato bhakti adhokshate ahitokya pratiyata yatmas prasidati. The self can only be satisfied by executing unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service. This devotional service should be unmotivated and uninterrupted. If it's going to be motivated, then as long as the gain is being felt, is realized, one may stick to it. But the moment one doesn't get what one wants, one is ready to terminate. Therefore, Vyasadeva says, Paro Dharma. Paro Dharma means genuine religion, pure religion. So, one should take to the path of devotional service with the desire that it be unmotivated and uninterrupted. Then the self will be satisfied. If one is approaching the demigods also and performing austerities or whatever, one can really never be satisfied as long as material desires are there. Hiranyakashipu performed such extreme austerities that even Brahma was baffled. Even Brahma was baffled when he saw that Hiranyakashipu had ants, millions of ants walking all over his body. But he was unpeaceful because he had material desires. So as long as we have material desires, one will always be unpeaceful. Therefore the Bhagavatam says, Paro Dharma. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita on this point mentions that Krishna Bhakta Niskama Ata Eva Shanta. Shanta means peaceful and Niskama means desireless. So the devotees of Krishna are desireless. Desireless doesn't mean that they have no desire, because when your desire is to make advancement towards surrendering to the Lord, that is actually the position of desirelessness. It is not that the devotee should have a vacuum in his mind. No, desire, when one desires to perfect one's existence by following the laws of the Lord, then that is actually the state of desirelessness. Because one is not desiring anything for one's personal sense gratification. So, Krishna Bhakta Niskama Ataeva Shanta. So, those devotees of Krishna who are trying to render pure devotional service, they are always peaceful. Bhakti Mukti Siddhi Kami Atra Sakali Ashanta. And the other types of transcendentalists, like those who want fruitive work, Fruitive work is just like entering into a transaction, except that you enter into a transaction with the Lord. Just like you walk into a store and you give a certain amount of payment in exchange for some goods that you walk out with. So fruitive activities means that you perform certain rituals, but in exchange for those rituals you want some material gains. So there are those who perform rituals. Of course, it should be pointed out that those who perform rituals are certainly more elevated than those who don't believe in any worship or any acknowledging the position of the Lord at all. But nevertheless, fruitive work is not the optimum or the conclusion of service. There is pure devotional service, which is the topmost or the goal that one has to achieve. So, bhakti, mukti. Those who want to do fruitive work, those who want mukti, those who want liberation. Mukti, siddhi. Siddhi means those who want to achieve the different mystic perfections. There are different mystic perfections like anima, lagima, prapti and so on that people try to achieve. So bhakti, mukti, siddhi, kami. Kami means lusty. So Krishnadas Kaviraj says the bhaktis, the muktis and the siddhis, they're all lusty. And because they're all lusty, sakali ashanta. Ashanta means unpeaceful and shanta means the opposite, peaceful. So these categories of transcendentalists, because they're maintaining material motives, they're unpeaceful. And the devotees of the Lord, because they take to the path of bhakti, they are peaceful. Just like we chant the 6 Shastaka slokas, that is very wonderful. But we have to keep meditating on the philosophy or the translation or the meaning of these verses. For example, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Na dinam na janam na sandadem kavitam va jagadisha kamaye mama janme janmeshware bhavān bhakti aita kityaye. He says that, my dear Lord, na danam na janam na sundaram, I do not want any wealth or woman or followers. Then what do you want? Mama janmani janmeshware. I want to have the facility to serve you, life after life. Thakur Bhakti Vinod has also exhibited the same mood very nicely. Thakur Bhakti Vinod says that, my dear Lord, if I have to take my birth again, I may take my birth in the house of a Vaishnava, even if I have to take it as a worm, because at least in the house of a Vaishnava, one will have the opportunity to hear the holy names of the Lord. So, to succeed on this path of devotional service, we must be anxious to execute parodharma. We must be anxious to execute niskama bhakti. Niskama bhakti, as we have just explained, consists of that path of bhakti which is independent or free of material desires. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Sikshastaka has pointed out that our goal should not be to achieve anything but just have the opportunity to serve the Lord. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Sikshastaka has given us another very important and famous sloka, that is very essential to develop love of God. We were once told a very nice story by Prabhupada's godbrother, and the story is as follows. That Prabhupada, as we all know, was in Allahabad at a certain time preparing in the pharmaceutical business, preparing medicine. And Prabhupada had prepared a vitamin tonic. And he was showing that new vitamin tonic to his godbrother. And the godbrother said, Abhi Babu, show me the tonic by which you can develop love of God. Because obviously we are all in the Krishna conscious movement to develop love of God, isn't it? Outside of that, we should be having no other interest, regardless of whether one is a brahmachari or grihastha or a sannyasa or a vanaprastha. Everyone actually should be working with the same goal in mind. So, this godbrother told Prabhupada, so give me the tonic by which I can develop love of God. So Prabhupada, of course, was very humble. Prabhupada said, I don't have the tonic as yet, but I know the formula. It's just like, obviously to make any medicine you need a formula. So the godmother insisted, okay, please tell me what the formula is. So Prabhupada then told him the formula. And what was the formula? I'm sure one of you could guess it. So the formula was this. Wasn't chant exactly, but it was as follows. Prabhupada said, Tinada viśva-bandhave tirorapi saishanuna manina manadina kirtanadi sadahari. This was the formula that Prabhupada claimed was necessary in order to develop love of God. So it is important that we follow this. Tinada viśva-bandhave. More humbler than a blade of grass. The grass has to be so tolerant, isn't it? Everybody walks on a piece of grass, but actually the grass still doesn't retaliate. Sometimes all of you have experienced it, even if you're sleeping and somebody comes and just steps on you by mistake, especially if it's in the night, and you're trying to, someone's trying to reach for the lights, you get so upset. But everyone's walking on the grass and you never hear of the grass retaliating. So, and the grass doesn't retaliate, the tree is so tolerant, winter, summer, rain, whatever. The tree is there ready to help you. In the rainy season, you take shelter of the tree, you stand underneath the tree. In the hot sun, you take shelter of the tree. So the tree is always ready to give you shelter. So one has to be extremely tolerant and devoid of this sense of false prestige. If we can free ourselves from this false prestige, then we will be able to distance ourselves from the gross and subtle coverings. Just like the Bhagavatam gives an example of coconut. Coconut pulp, when the coconut dries up, the pulp gets disconnected from the shell. And then when you move the coconut, you can hear the pulp. So similarly, as one progresses on the spiritual path, as Śrīla Gopāla Kṛṣṇa says, it is such a safe path that one who runs on it, even if both their eyes closed, there's no question of falling down. Even a little bit of devotional service done never goes in vain. And as Krishna says, Gāntya pratijani nama bhakta pranashati, my devotee will never perish. So about this, there must be full understanding that a devotee of Krishna will never perish. A devotee of Krishna depends upon Krishna, he doesn't depend upon any material arrangement. The Kauravas depended upon material arrangement. So they selected all the great warriors and the latest in weaponry. But the Pandavas were just dependent upon Krishna, and ultimately they were victorious. So the devotee depends upon Krishna in a practical manner. Not that we depend upon Krishna in some sentimental manner. There has to be a practical approach to depending upon Krishna. And our dependence upon Krishna increases as we strictly follow the rules and regulations that one is given. The rules and regulations that are handed down by the parampara should be very sincerely followed. And if we follow the rules and regulations very, very sincerely, then actually one will be able to make spiritual advancement. One will be able to uproot. These material desires have to be completely uprooted from the heart. Just like Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj asked Shukadeva a very practical, logical question. Parikshit Maharaj said, what is the value of it to profess atonement if it's not genuine? He said, just like an elephant. An elephant goes and takes bath and then comes out of the water and it sits in the mud and again it becomes dirty, isn't it? So Parikshit Maharaj wanted to know from Shukadeva Goswami, how can one really uproot the material desires completely from the heart? Because even if the tree catches fire, but because the roots of the tree are there below the earth, it's again going to grow. So Parikshit Maharaj was inquiring, how can one stop this business of sinning and atoning? So Shukadeva Goswami replied, that what was necessary was that we had to completely uproot these material desires. And one can uproot these material desires by getting absorbed in devotional service, which begins with chanting. This chanting is the key. Devotional service begins with chanting, Śrīla Gopāla Kṛṣṇa. This chanting is the key. And we take to this chanting, we're attentive in the chanting, then there will be the development of love of God. So, to summarize this verse, we see that Sati is continuing to exhibit her anger at her father Daksha. Sati, Shiva was not invited to the sacrifice, but Sati convinced Shiva to please let me go there, because she said one can go to the father's house, the spiritual master's house, without any permission. So Sati is continuing to plead with her father, Daksha, to come to his senses, and once again we see that Sati glorifies the Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is being adequately described by Sati. Lord Shiva is not an ordinary personality, one of the 12 great spiritual authorities, the greatest Vaishnava, very compassionate, friend of all living entities, and who is only concerned about the welfare of others. Hare Krishna.